What if the greatest threats to your success were not the enemies you see, but the silent forces living inside you, shaping your choices, choking your ambition, and quietly dismantling everything you could become? Most people fear failure as if it arrives with footsteps, warnings, or declarations. But Machiavelli knew the truth. The most dangerous killers do not enter your life through the front door. They slip through the cracks of your mind, disguised as comfort, disguised as kindness, disguised as logic, disguised as morality, disguised as the excuses you whisper to yourself when no one is listening. He understood that a ruler is not destroyed by armies, conspirators, or rivals until he is first destroyed by his own inner weaknesses. And you, standing in the quiet tension between who you are and who you could be, are surrounded by these same invisible assassins. They are patient, they are subtle, they strike only when you look away from yourself, and they take everything. But before you can hunt them, you must enter a certain darkness, the kind that forces you to see without the filter of illusions, the kind of darkness Machiavelli walked through his entire life. The world he lived in was a battlefield of power, betrayal, ambition, and cold calculation. But the lessons he drew from it were not meant only for princes. They were meant for any human being who wishes to rise beyond mediocrity, beyond the suffocating expectations of others, beyond the limitations silently welded around the mind. Because success, in any era, is a war, and like all wars, the greatest victories depend not on conquering others, but on conquering the subtle forces capable of poisoning your judgment. You feel these forces even if you cannot name them. You feel them the moment you hesitate before a crucial decision. You feel them when you shrink your dreams to fit the size of your current fears. You feel them when you notice yourself drifting, losing focus, losing urgency, becoming smaller, quieter, safer. And somewhere deep inside, a voice keeps telling you that you were meant for more, that you have slept long enough, that the life you are living is not the limit of your potential but the limit of your courage. Machiavelli would tell you that courage is not the absence of fear, for fear is the one ally you must never dismiss. He would say that courage is the willingness to act even when fear whispers its most persuasive stories. The trouble is that most people allow fear to become the author of their entire life, not through panic, not through visible trembling, but through silent, invisible habits that slowly curve the spine of ambition until it collapses into something forgettable. Machiavelli saw that this collapse rarely happens in dramatic ways. It happens quietly, with soft internal compromises that accumulate until you no longer recognize yourself. Imagine the feel of Florence in Machiavelli's time, narrow cobblestone streets still echoing with the footsteps of spies, merchants whispering rumors disguised as conversation, the cold shadow of political scheming falling across every doorway. In this world, weakness was not a flaw, it was a death sentence. A prince who hesitated, who failed to understand human nature, who trusted too easily, who allowed emotion to guide decision, was already a corpse, even if he still wore a crown. Machiavelli studied these men. He watched them rise, fail, betray, and be betrayed. He saw their public defeats, but more importantly, he saw the private cracks that caused them. He came to understand that the downfall of powerful men begins long before the world takes notice. It begins in the invisible realm, in their desires, their biases, their insecurities, their inability to confront uncomfortable truths. And if this is true for the powerful, it is even more true for those trying to rise. The killers strike early, before ambition fully forms, before discipline becomes identity, before purpose becomes unshakable. They kill potential long before potential becomes reality, and that is why you must expose them. But to see them, you must be willing to step into the shadowed corridors of your own mind. You must be willing to confront the parts of yourself that sabotage you in silence. You must be willing to stand naked before your own reflection, stripped of excuses, stripped of comforting lies, stripped of the identity you've built to protect your ego from the truth. Because success requires a form of brutality, not toward others, but toward the inner forces that keep you obedient to your limitations. Machiavelli believed the human condition was defined by contradiction. People crave greatness but cling to comfort. They dream of power but flee from responsibility. They want freedom but seek safety. And in this contradiction, silent killers flourish. They flourish when you postpone decisions, They flourish when you choose distraction over discipline. They flourish when you guard your weaknesses instead of transforming them. Consider the first killer, the enemy that appears harmless because it arrives softly, without threat, without violence. It is not laziness, because laziness is obvious. It is something far more dangerous. It is the belief that you still have time. This belief is seductive. It strokes your ego, telling you that your potential is eternal, that opportunities will wait for you, that greatness can be summoned whenever you decide you are ready. Machiavelli would laugh at this delusion. He would tell you that time is the most ruthless tyrant of all, and it is loyal to no one. Princes fall because they underestimate timing. Ordinary people remain ordinary because they surrender their urgency. Machiavelli saw opportunity as a force that only rewards those who strike decisively. Lose your momentum, and the doors you thought were yours will close without apology. Delay your growth, and you will meet a future shaped not by your intention, but by your inaction. The killer disguised as time whispers to you every day. It tells you that tomorrow is safe, tomorrow is possible, tomorrow is guaranteed. But Machiavelli would say tomorrow belongs to the wolves, and if you want it, you must be willing to tear it from life itself. Then there is the second killer, the one Machiavelli considered the most seductive of all, the desire to be liked. You may think you are free from this desire, but you are not. Even the strongest minds have tasted the poison of needing approval. It disguises itself as kindness, humility, cooperation, virtue. But beneath these illusions lies the truth. The desire to be liked bends your spine, dilutes your power, and silences your instincts. Machiavelli wrote that a leader who seeks to be loved will lose everything. For love, he said, is conditional, fragile, easily manipulated. But fear commands respect, fear enforces boundaries, fear protects. But Machiavelli was not telling you to become cruel for its own sake. He was telling you that strength must outweigh sentiment, that your purpose must outweigh your need for validation. Because if you allow others to define you, they will also define your limits. And this killer, the hunger for approval, has destroyed more dreams than talent ever has. It makes you mute when you should speak, passive when you should act, agreeable when you should rebel. It slowly kills the lion within you and replaces it with a sheep wearing polite expressions. And then there is the third killer, the whisper that convinces you that your past defines your ceiling. This killer sinks its claws into your identity. It tells you that your mistakes are permanent, that your failures are final, that your history is a chain around your future. But Machiavelli wrote that fortune favors those who rewrite themselves. He believed that identity was clay, not stone, that it should be shaped according to your ambition, not your memory. But most people let their past negotiate their future. They let it limit their courage. They let it shrink their vision. They let it convince them that growth is an illusion. And in doing so, they kill the future they never even allowed themselves to imagine. But the most dangerous killers, the ones Machiavelli feared even for himself, were those that masqueraded as virtues. Patience that becomes procrastination, humility that becomes self-erasure, loyalty that becomes self-betrayal, morality that becomes strategic blindness. These killers do not feel like enemies. They feel like values. They feel like goodness. But Machiavelli knew that goodness untempered by strategy leads to ruin. He saw that a man who refuses to confront the darkness of the world will eventually be destroyed by it. As he wrote The Prince, he was not crafting a manual for cruelty. He was crafting a manual for survival. He wanted his reader to understand the world as it truly is, not as they wish it to be. And the world, he discovered, is governed by forces that reward strength, clarity, decisiveness, and psychological insight. Success is not given, it is taken, and the barriers you face are not external until they are internalized. The killers thrive in silence, because silence is where fear grows. Fear of judgment, fear of failure, fear of exposure, fear of seeing yourself as you truly are. Machiavelli believed that self-deception was the most fatal flaw of all. A leader who cannot see himself clearly cannot see the world clearly either. And a person who cannot see their weaknesses will feed them unknowingly until those weaknesses become destiny. There are moments in life when you feel something shifting inside you, a tension, a restlessness, a dissatisfaction that you cannot name. This is the moment when the killers begin to stir, because they know you are waking up. They know you are starting to question the narrative you have lived under. They know you are beginning to sense your potential, and they fear it. because potential is their natural enemy. They thrive when you are numb, distracted, obedient. But the moment you become aware, the moment you begin to see the invisible architecture of your own downfall, you become dangerous. And Machiavelli believed that danger was necessary. Not danger toward others, but danger toward your own stagnation. You must become dangerous to your limitations. You must become a threat to your fears. You must become the nightmare of your excuses. This requires a mindset carved from honesty and fire. It requires confronting the parts of yourself you have avoided for years. It requires stepping into a battlefield within your own mind and declaring that the old version of you is no longer fit to command your life. Think of your life as a territory. Inside this territory are regions ruled by strength, clarity, ambition, discipline. But there are also regions ruled by fear, distraction, guilt, insecurity. And the silent killers live in those dark corners, waiting for moments when your awareness weakens. Machiavelli would tell you that a true ruler never leaves parts of his territory unmanaged. Because where the ruler is absent, enemies grow. If you avoid parts of your mind, if you protect illusions instead of truth, if you allow emotional comfort to take priority over strategic growth, the killers will rise and conquer everything you should have ruled, and success, real success, requires an internal monarchy. You must rule yourself before you rule your life. You must command your mind before you command your destiny. But ruling yourself is not a gentle process. It requires confrontation. It requires discipline sharper than fear. It requires honesty sharper than pain. It requires looking into the dark and refusing to look away. Machiavelli believed that greatness belonged to those who understood human nature, not just in others, but in themselves. He believed that self-knowledge was the sharpest weapon. He believed that the internal war mattered more than any external victory. Because if you cannot conquer your own mind, someone else will. The world is filled with forces waiting to rule those who refuse to rule themselves. So ask yourself, when did you stop demanding excellence from yourself? When did you begin negotiating with your potential? When did you allow fear to disguise itself as logic? When did you accept a life that feels smaller than the one you once imagined? These are not questions meant to punish you, they are meant to awaken you. Because deep within you, beneath all the excuses and all the hesitation, there is a fire that refuses to die. And the silent killers have been trying to smother that fire since the moment it was born. But fires do not die easily. They can be buried, but they will always wait for oxygen. And this moment, this awareness, this confrontation, is oxygen. You stand now at the threshold of a deeper understanding of yourself. You stand at the edge of a darkness Machiavelli believed every ambitious soul must enter. This darkness is not your enemy. It is the territory where transformation happens. It is where illusions die and clarity is born. It is where the killers reveal themselves. And once you see them, once you recognize their shapes, once you understand how they move within you, you will never again be the same. You do not notice the moment the killers first slip into your life. They arrive long before your ambition has a name, long before you understand the weight of desire, long before you even realize that success is not a path you walk but a throne you seize. Machiavelli observed this in every ruler he studied. Their downfall did not begin in the heat of war or in the chaos of rebellion. It began in the quiet moments when they believed they were safe. And safety, he believed, is the greatest illusion ever crafted by the human mind. Safety tells you to relax. Safety tells you to stop moving. Safety tells you that your progress is guaranteed. But Machiavelli knew that the world is always shifting, always conspiring, always demanding vigilance, and the ones who fall are those who trust comfort more than clarity. You have felt that comfort, the seductive warmth of familiar routines, predictable days, acceptable mediocrity. It numbs you. It whispers that you have done enough for now, that you deserve rest, that there is no need to push further. But this whisper is not compassion. It is anesthesia. It dulls the blade of your ambition until it grows rusty, until it loses its purpose, until you forget why you ever forged it in the first place. Machiavelli would say that comfort is a weapon your enemy uses against you, even when the enemy is yourself. He watched powerful men crumble not because they lacked talent or opportunity, but because they allowed themselves to become too comfortable, too certain, too trusting of the illusion that their position was permanent. Nothing is permanent, not power, not relevance, not your drive. Success must be hunted daily. You must wake each morning willing to defend it from the forces that wish to take it from you. And the greatest of those forces are not external. They live within you, patient and silent. Among these killers is the one Machiavelli feared the most, the killer born from the mind's endless capacity to deceive itself. Self-deception is a poison more lethal than betrayal, more destructive than failure, more corrosive than fear. It whispers in the voice you trust most, your own. It convinces you that you are trying your best when you are not. It convinces you that your limitations are natural when they are excuses. It convinces you that the goals you abandoned were never truly yours, that the dreams you forgot were unrealistic, that the future you once envisioned was childish optimism, and you believe it because you want to, because truth requires strength, and lies require only surrender. Machiavelli wrote that a ruler who fails to understand himself will inevitably misunderstand the world, and a person who tells themselves comforting lies will walk in circles their entire life. Self-deception kills slowly, but it kills completely. It robs you of honesty, the single most powerful weapon a strategist can wield. Without honesty, you cannot measure your progress. Without honesty, you cannot confront your weaknesses. Without honesty, you cannot break the patterns that hold you hostage. Machiavelli knew that truth is painful, but he also knew that pain is the midwife of transformation. To confront these inner killers, you must be willing to stand in the raw, unfiltered light of self-awareness. You must be willing to admit that you have failed yourself. You must be willing to expose the parts of your mind you have always protected. Because success demands sacrifice, and one of the greatest sacrifices you can make is the sacrifice of your illusions. There is another killer Machiavelli identified, one so subtle that most people mistake it for a virtue, loyalty to the wrong people. You believe that loyalty is noble. You believe that standing by others proves your character. But Machiavelli would ask you a more uncomfortable question. What if the people you are loyal to are the very ones sabotaging your future? Loyalty becomes a killer when it ties you to mediocrity, when it binds you to those who fear your growth, when it convinces you to stay small because others prefer you that way. Imagine a prince surrounded by advisors who do not wish for his rise, but for his obedience. They flatter him, they comfort him, they praise him, they speak to his ego rather than his ambition. And slowly, subtly, they weaken him, not with malice, but with softness. They keep him safe, and in doing so, they keep him powerless. Machiavelli saw this in courts across Italy. He saw rulers who were never betrayed by their enemies but by the people they trusted, by the people they refused to leave behind, by the people who were unworthy of their loyalty. Your life mirrors this truth more than you realize. There are people in your orbit who fear what you might become. They fear the version of you who no longer needs them, who no longer fits the role they have given you. They fear the strength you would embody if you stopped living according to their expectations. And so they soothe you, they distract you, they keep you comfortable, they keep you ordinary. But Machiavelli would tell you that loyalty to such people is a cage disguised as kindness. He believed that loyalty is only valuable when it serves your purpose. And while this may sound cold, understand what he meant. You cannot sacrifice your destiny to preserve relationships that shrink you. You cannot dim your ambition to maintain harmony. You cannot betray yourself to protect others from their own insecurity. This killer, misplaced loyalty, has destroyed countless potential leaders. It has kept brilliant minds bound to small worlds. It has turned lions into servants. Machiavelli warned that to rise, you must choose alliances strategically, not emotionally. And the first alliance you must form is with your own future. Then there is the killer almost everyone carries like a shadow, the fear of standing alone. Humans are tribal. We want to belong. We want to be understood. We want to move with the comfort of a crowd. But Machiavelli knew that greatness is often a solitary road. He saw that the minds capable of reshaping the world are rarely accepted by it. He understood that isolation is not a punishment, but a crucible. It is where identity is reforged, where strength is purified, where vision becomes unshakable. But most people run from loneliness. They fear the silence because silence exposes them to themselves. Silence forces them to confront what they have been avoiding. Silence strips away the noise that distorts the truth. And in this fear of solitude, the killer grows stronger. It convinces you to conform. It convinces you to hide your uniqueness. It convinces you to shrink your voice until it matches the voices around you. It convinces you that standing alone is a sign of failure rather than a sign of courage. But Machiavelli would tell you that the person who cannot stand alone is a person who will never stand at all. The killers work together. They are not isolated forces. They conspire. The desire for comfort feeds self-deception. Self-deception feeds misplaced loyalty. Loyalty feeds fear of solitude. And fear of solitude feeds mediocrity. They form a chain strong enough to bind anyone, unless you break it deliberately. Machiavelli believed that breaking this chain requires something rare, a confrontation with your own nature. He did not romanticize human beings. He did not pretend people were inherently wise or noble. He saw them clearly, driven by fear, motivated by self-interest, swayed by emotion, tempted by convenience. But he also believed that certain individuals could rise above this default state, not by rejecting their human nature, but by mastering it. He once wrote that fortune controls half of our actions, but the other half is within our power. This was not an observation of fate, but a challenge. Most people surrender their entire life to the half controlled by fortune. They blame circumstances, history, upbringing, luck, timing, other people. They never learn to control the part that is theirs. They never step into the battlefield where their mind shapes their future. And so they become victims not of misfortune, but of themselves. Imagine standing in the center of your life as if it were a vast empire. You look around and see regions governed by discipline, ambition, clarity, passion. But you also see territories overtaken by weakness, by fear, procrastination, guilt, distraction, insecurity. You see walls that have not been guarded. You see borders that have been allowed to decay. You see enemies you have pretended not to notice. Machiavelli would tell you that you cannot rule an empire you refuse to inspect. You cannot command forces you fear to confront. You cannot defend land you have never walked. Success requires dominion over the territories within your own mind. You must take back the land occupied by doubt. You must reclaim the fortresses abandoned to fear. You must rebuild the walls weakened by years of excuses. This is not a peaceful process. It requires conflict. It requires psychological warfare against the parts of yourself that resist change. But Machiavelli believed that war, internal or external, reveals the truth of who you are. He studied the nature of conflict, not just for political strategy, but for psychological wisdom. A leader who avoids conflict becomes weak. A person who avoids discomfort becomes fragile. A mind that avoids struggle becomes soft. Machiavelli believed that growth demands tension. He believed that ambition demands pressure. He believed that a powerful mind is forged in the same way a powerful kingdom is built, through confrontation, through strategy, through deliberate domination of the forces that threaten it. And so you must look at the killers not as abstract concepts but as enemies occupying your inner territory. They are not equal in strength. Some whisper, some shout, some hide, some manipulate. But all of them seek the same thing: control over your life. And as long as they control your thoughts, your identity, your decisions, your habits, they control your destiny. But Machiavelli would remind you of something vital: enemies can be defeated. They can be exposed, understood, outmaneuvered, and eliminated. But only if you face them. Only if you choose to rule yourself with the same intensity a prince rules his state. Only if you are willing to step away from the life that feels safe and step into the life that feels demanding. Because success is not for the comfortable. It is for the disciplined. It is for the aware. It is for the strategically ruthless. Not ruthless toward others, but ruthless toward their own limitations. There is a moment in every powerful person's life when they realize that their growth is nobody's responsibility but their own. No one is coming to save you. No one is coming to force you to rise. No one is coming to eliminate your killers for you. This moment is not tragic. It is liberating. It marks the end of dependence and the beginning of self-sovereignty. Machiavelli understood this. He understood that autonomy is the highest form of power. And autonomy begins when you stop waiting for permission and start claiming authority over your own mind. Think of the decisions you postponed. Think of the habits you intended to change but never did. Think of the dreams you lowered to fit the comfort of your current identity. Each one is a battlefield where a silent killer won without resistance. But you are here now, awakening to what Machiavelli knew, that awareness is the first act of rebellion, and rebellion is the first act of transformation. You stand now with a clearer view of your internal architecture, seeing not just what you have built, but what you have allowed. And in this awareness lies a choice, one that will define everything that follows. You can turn away from this darkness and return to comfort, as most people do. Or you can walk deeper into it, as all powerful minds must do. Machiavelli would tell you that the path to greatness is never illuminated by certainty. It is illuminated by willingness, the willingness to confront, to adapt, to evolve, to fight. And now, as you step further into the shadows of your own mind, you will begin to see the killers not as vague forces, but as distinct presences. You will see how they move, how they disguise themselves, how they manipulate your thoughts, how they shape your behavior. And once you see them clearly, once you recognize their patterns, once you understand their strategies, you will be able to dismantle them with the precision Machiavelli admired most. The killers are waiting, but so is the version of you that they fear. You feel the shift before you understand it, a quiet tightening in your chest, a subtle sharpening of your attention, the faint sensation that something hidden inside you is finally stirring. It is the same sensation Machiavelli believed marked the beginning of transformation. Not an eruption, not a revelation, but a subtle awakening, a whisper from the deeper self that has waited for years to be acknowledged. This awakening is not comfortable, it is not gentle, it does not soothe you, it confronts you, because the killers within you cannot survive in a mind that has opened its eyes, and now slowly, dangerously, inevitably, your eyes are opening. Machiavelli would tell you that awareness is both a blessing and a burden. It forces you to see the world with clarity that others avoid. It forces you to recognize the structures of your life not as accidental, but as chosen. It forces you to acknowledge that the barriers between you and your potential are not external walls, but internal agreements. Agreements you made with fear, agreements you made with your past, agreements you made with the people who preferred you powerless. And the moment you break these agreements, everything changes. But before you can break them, you must understand the killers in their full form. They are not metaphors, they are psychological forces that shape your destiny as surely as gravity shapes the earth. And among them is one so insidious, so persuasive, so deeply embedded in the human spirit, that Machiavelli considered it the destroyer of empires and the silent assassin of greatness, the addiction to distraction. Do not underestimate this killer. It does not strike with violence. It does not pull you down suddenly. It dissolves you. It erodes your focus grain by grain, moment by moment, until your attention, the one resource your ambition cannot survive without, becomes fragmented. You lose hours not through conscious choice, but through passive surrender. You scroll, you wander, you drift, you escape the present moment because the present moment demands effort, and distraction offers a painless alternative. But here lies the danger Machiavelli foresaw. Your life is built from the moments you pay attention to. If your attention is scattered, your life becomes scattered. If your attention is captured by triviality, your purpose becomes diluted. If your attention is stolen by the world, you lose the ability to shape your destiny. And nothing terrifies the killers more than a mind capable of sustained focus. Focus is a weapon. Focus is sovereignty. Focus is the blade that cuts through the illusions that bind you. And the killers know this. That is why they work tirelessly to keep your mind unfocused, overstimulated, exhausted by meaningless noise. Machiavelli wrote that a ruler must always remain alert, even in times of peace. The greatest danger, he believed, was not the enemy who attacks, but the one who distracts. A distracted ruler loses control. A distracted person loses themselves. And in the modern world, distraction does not appear as a threat. It appears as entertainment, as convenience, as endless options designed to occupy your mind without nourishing it. The killers do not need to stop you. They only need to keep you busy with everything that does not matter. But there is another killer, one more ancient than distraction and more destructive than fear. The killer born from the belief that you must wait for the perfect moment. Perfectionism does not feel like failure. It feels like preparation. It disguises itself as high standards, as careful planning, as responsible thinking. But Machiavelli saw through this illusion. He understood that waiting for perfection is another form of fear, another way of surrendering your power, another silent killer that stops you from taking action. Perfectionism whispers that you are not ready, that you need more time, that the conditions are not right, that you must first eliminate uncertainty. But uncertainty is the battlefield where success is won. If you wait until the path is clear, you will never move. If you wait until you feel confident, you will never begin. If you wait for the approval of others, you will never lead. Machiavelli knew that decisive action, imperfect, courageous and timely, was worth more than perfect plans that never reach reality. Most people fail not because they lack potential, but because they hesitate until opportunity disappears. He observed that fortune favors the bold, not because boldness is moral, but because boldness is rare. Perfectionism kills boldness. It reduces you to potential that is never realized, ambition that is never pursued, ideas that never escape the safety of your mind. And this is precisely how the killers want you, safe inside your imagination, fantasizing instead of acting. Then, there is the killer that whispers from the deepest corners of your mind, the one Machiavelli considered the architect of self-sabotage, the fear of success itself. Most people do not admit they fear success, but they feel it. Success demands change. Success demands responsibility. Success demands transformation. And transformation threatens everything familiar. Your current life knows its place. Your current identity knows its role. Your current habits know their patterns. Success disrupts all of this. It threatens to separate you from the people you know, from the life you built, from the version of yourself you have always been. This fear is not irrational. Success requires that you become someone else, not pretend, but become. You must shed your weaknesses. You must sacrifice your excuses. You must rebuild the foundations of your identity. And deep down, the part of you that fears change resists this violently. It convinces you to stay where you are. It convinces you that rising is dangerous. It convinces you that ambition will cost you more than it will reward you. It convinces you to slow down, to step back, to choose predictability over possibility. This is the killer that extinguishes greatness before it even sparks. Machiavelli wrote that most people would rather remain comfortable in their misery than risk the uncertainty of transformation. And this truth has not changed. You carry within you a fear not of failure, but of the person you could become, the person who would demand more from you, who would hold you accountable, who would force you to confront the parts of your life built on weakness. The killers thrive on this fear. They know that if they can keep you attached to the familiar, they can control you forever. But perhaps the deadliest killer of all, the one that Machiavelli believed destroyed more potential rulers than any external threat, is passiveness, the refusal to take responsibility for your own life. Passiveness feels harmless, it feels peaceful, it feels neutral, but passiveness is the poison that drains your agency. It is the quiet belief that life happens to you rather than through you. It convinces you to adapt instead of act, to endure instead of shape, to follow instead of led. And while you wait for circumstances to change, while you hope for better opportunities, while you dream of a future you are not actively building, the killers claim more of your mind. Passiveness is the throne you leave empty, and the killers sit upon it in your place. Machiavelli believed that a ruler who does not rule himself will be ruled by others. A person who does not choose their own path will walk the path chosen for them. A mind that does not command its own. This presence is not loud. It does not beg for attention. It does not force itself into your awareness. It waits, patient, unbroken, untouched by the killers you fed. This is your potential. Not the fantasy version, not the romantic version, but the raw, unfiltered force of what you could become if you stop negotiating with your weaknesses. Machiavelli believed that potential is like a kingdom inherited at birth, vast, powerful, filled with unclaimed territory. Most people never rule it. They live as exiles in the smallest corner of themselves. But some awaken. Some reclaim what is theirs. Some declare war against the killers and refuse to surrender. And you, in this moment, are awakening. Now the path becomes darker. Not because the killers grow stronger, but because you are approaching the place they fear the most. The place where you begin to take back control. Machiavelli believed that self-control is the highest form of power, the kind that cannot be stolen, manipulated, or destroyed. It is the power that turns chaos into strategy, fear into action, doubt into clarity. To wield this power, you must first step into the internal battlefield with intention, not fear. You must see your mind not as a victim of the killers, but as the terrain upon which you will defeat them. Every fear becomes intelligence, every hesitation becomes insight, every weakness becomes territory waiting to be reclaimed. Machiavelli would tell you that you cannot rise through avoidance. You rise through mastery, and mastery begins with a single decision, the decision to become the ruler of your own mind, not its prisoner. As you stand now, deeper in the realm of your psychology, you can feel the tension shifting. The killers that once moved invisibly now sense your awakening. They sense the threat you have become. They sense the fire inside you strengthening, sharpening, preparing, and for the first time, they fear you. This is not the end of the battle, it is the beginning. In the end, everything becomes a theater of masks, and the deeper you walk into the corridors of ambition, the more you realize how few truly understand the cost of remaining awake inside a world designed to lull you into submission. The fourth silent killer is not a single force, but a shadow that grows roots quietly, wrapping itself around the spine of your willpower until you can no longer tell the difference between your own voice and the one whispering through the cracks of your self-doubt. If the earlier killers were daggers aimed directly at the throat of your potential, this one is a slow poison, a distortion of perception that creeps into your internal dialogue and replaces your clarity with noise. And Machiavelli would tell you that noise is the most efficient weapon ever crafted against human progress, because no tyrant needs to touch you if you are already fighting yourself. There is a moment every ambitious person faces, a moment where the path no longer feels illuminated by purpose but instead clouded by questions that should never have been allowed to enter. What if I'm not meant for this? What if I am overreaching? What if I fail and expose the fragility beneath all my effort? These questions aren't organic. They do not sprout from a natural caution or rational thinking. They are planted, cultivated, fed. They bloom in the soil of comparison, watered by the fears of those who resent your ascent, fertilized by the subtle insinuations of people who smile to your face while ensuring you remain below them. But the most dangerous truth Machiavelli understood is that the enemy doesn't need to defeat you. He merely needs to make you abandon yourself. This fourth killer comes dressed as reason. It persuades you to reconsider, to hold back, to pause. A mirror that pierces through your self-narratives and asks one brutal question: who convinced you that you were not enough? The silence that follows is not peaceful, it is suffocating, because most people discover that the hands around their throat belong to them. And Machiavelli would say that once you realize you are the jailer and the prisoner, you either rise with violent clarity or you decay quietly, becoming another forgotten casualty of hesitation. The fourth killer feeds off emotional fog. It thrives when you are too tired to analyze your doubts. It grows stronger when you seek comfort instead of confrontation, and its power peaks when you reach a point where you can no longer distinguish between instinct and intimidation. Suddenly every decision feels heavy, every move feels risky, every desire feels unrealistic. You begin editing your ambitions to make them more acceptable to those who never had the courage to pursue their own. You become a curator of smallness, polishing it until it looks like wisdom. But Machiavelli reminds us that those who shrink themselves for the comfort of others will eventually burn out from the suffocation of their unrealized potential. There is nothing noble about abandoning what you are capable of. Ambition is not a sin, it is the most honest expression of a person's inner design. And it is here, in the deeper corners of your psyche, that another truth emerges, quiet yet brutal. The world is not kind to the hesitant. It is carved by those who dare to impose themselves upon it, those who lock hands with fear and drag it forward until it stops screaming, those who treat doubt not as a master, but as something to dominate. The fourth killer becomes lethal because it is invisible. You do not notice its arrival. It does not announce itself with violence, but with softness. It tells you to rest a little longer. It encourages you to be more patient. It reminds you that you're still learning, still preparing, still waiting for the perfect moment that will never come. It makes comfort feel deserved. It makes delay feel responsible. And while you wait for alignment, opportunity dissolves. Then one day, you wake up and realize that your hesitation has cost you years you will never retrieve. It is not the external world that drains the power from a person. It is the internal permission to remain untransformed. Machiavelli believed that the greatest strategy in life is the control of perception. And the most dangerous perception is the one you hold about yourself. A person who sees themselves as unworthy will never fight for their rightful throne. A person who sees themselves as ordinary will never harness the force of their exceptional potential. A person who sees their ambition as a burden will never rise beyond the crowd. And so this killer keeps you mediocre, not through force, but through persuasion. Not through barriers, but through illusions. You become so consumed with trying to avoid mistakes that you avoid motion altogether. You become so obsessed with not losing that you forget how to win. You become so occupied with protecting yourself from judgment that you numb yourself to admiration. The truth Machiavelli understood is that your greatest victories require the death of your smaller self. You must choose discomfort over approval. You must choose risk over predictability. You must choose desire over hesitation. You must choose transformation over safety. And this choice must be made repeatedly, violently, until the weaker parts of you are too exhausted to interfere. The fourth killer is subtle, yes, but it is also relentless, and its greatest triumph is turning you into a spectator of your own life, watching, hoping, wondering, wishing, observing others become the versions of themselves you once envisioned for yourself. Time becomes an enemy as sharp as any blade, and you begin to understand that the tragedy of life is not death, but the slow erosion of potential into regret. But if there is one thing Machiavelli teaches above all else, it is that no poison is irreversible unless you continue drinking it willingly. Every killer, silent or visible, loses power the moment you confront it with ruthless self-awareness. You must ask yourself, in the private chambers of your own mind, who benefits from my hesitation? Who profits from my doubt? Who grows stronger when I choose comfort over conquest? The answers are never external. This is the awakening point, the moment where something ancient and fierce inside you shifts, the moment where you stop negotiating with your fears and start interrogating them, the moment where your hesitation is exposed as the true enemy, the moment where your mind becomes a weapon again, sharp and unforgiving, and as the fog lifts, you sense the return of something you lost long ago, the hunger that once defined you. This hunger is not loud, it does not roar. Hunger hums, a low, steady vibration beneath your ribs, reminding you of everything you have not yet claimed. It reminds you that your ambition is older than your wounds, older than your insecurities, older than the stories you were told to keep you obedient. You were not born to stay small, you were conditioned to stay small, and conditions can be broken. You rise from the fog with eyes no longer blurred by doubt, but sharpened by the betrayal of your own hesitation. You look at the world not as a battlefield of risks, but as a map of opportunities waiting for your intrusion. You realize that hesitation was never caution, it was captivity, and the moment it dilutes your hunger with the illusion of arrival, and the moment you start treating there is another killer intertwined with it, one that grows from the same soil but spreads in a different shape: emotional fatigue. The exhaustion that follows sustained ambition, the weariness that comes from pushing forward when no one sees, understands or validates your struggle, the fatigue that makes you begin questioning whether the battle is worth its wounds. Real ambition is lonely. It isolates you from the comfort of being understood, from the warmth of being applauded, from the ease of walking alongside the average. It forces you to hunt your dreams in the dark, navigating terrain that most people will never dare to explore. And in that darkness, emotional exhaustion becomes a parasite. It tells you that progress without praise is pointless. It tells you that effort without recognition is wasted. It tells you that if no one sees the struggle has no value. But that is the lie of the weak, and Machiavelli would tell you that true strength is measured not by who applauds you, but by who fears your silence. You do not rise for recognition. You rise because the alternative is stagnation. You do not push for applause. You push because the fire inside you refuses to dim. You do not endure for validation. You endure because every second of discipline compounds into a force no one can imitate. The world does not reward the emotionally fatigued, it rewards the emotionally unbreakable, and yet, this killer feeds on your humanity. It sinks its roots into the longing you have for reassurance, encouragement, stability. It makes you believe that taking your foot off the pedal is self-care. But self-care becomes self-collapse when it transforms from recovery into avoidance. The exhaustion you feel is not a sign to stop, it is a sign to sharpen your mind. Because the deeper truth Machiavelli understood is that fatigue is a threshold. Beyond it lies either collapse or domination. Those who collapse become spectators of their own dreams. Those who dominate become architects of their destiny. But here is the coldest truth. Complacency and fatigue do not just slow you down, they invite predators. The moment you soften, someone else sharpens. The moment you rest, someone else rewrites their strategy. The moment you wait, someone else advances. The world is an ecosystem of hunger, and hunger always eats softness. You begin to realize that ambition is not about speed, it is about maintaining pressure. Pressure not on the world, but on yourself. Pressure that keeps your edge sharp even when life tries to dull you. Pressure that reminds you that comfort is the enemy of evolution. Pressure that keeps the fire inside you alive, roaring, refusing to shrink into something manageable. At some point, a question arises: why do you want this? Why do you fight? Why do you refuse to settle? Why does comfort suffocate you? Why does complacency terrify you more than failure ever could? Machiavelli would answer without hesitation: because some people are engineered not for survival, but for conquest. Conquest not always of others, but of the self. Conquest of fear, conquest of limitation, conquest of the shadows that cling to your ambition. Conquest of every internal force that tries to keep you restrained, obedient, soft. The fifth killer thrives when you forget who you are, when you forget what you said you'd do, when you forget the promises carved into your soul long before the world tried to tame you. It thrives when you water your excuses and starve your discipline. It thrives when you romanticize the progress you have already made, instead of hungering for the progress you have yet to make. But a time comes, a violent internal awakening, when complacency becomes repulsive to you, when the softness you once allowed begins to disgust you, when your future self begins to scream at you from the depths of your imagination. Do not stop now, because the truth is, you are not done. You have barely begun. And the fire inside you is not dying. It is waiting for you to strip away the illusions that smothered it. Machiavelli believed that only those who maintain a relentless state of becoming ever achieve power, never arrived, never comfortable, never softened, always becoming, always sharpening, always advancing. And as you stand now on the edge of the next transformation, you feel something shift inside you. A familiar hunger returning, a dangerous clarity awakening, a reminder that comfort was never your destiny. Your destiny has teeth. The fifth silent killer retreats not when you rest, but when you rise again with a force more precise than before. You reclaim your ambition not with loud declarations, but with the quiet, disciplined violence of returning to your mission without apology. And once you do, once the fire resurges in your veins, you realize the most important truth of all: you were never afraid of hard work. You were afraid of outgrowing the person you used to be. But that fear is gone now, because the next chapter of your evolution demands a version of you unrecognizable to your former self, and you are finally ready to become that version. In the deep corridors of ambition, there comes a moment when all illusions fall away. The masks of strength you once wore, the pride that hid your wounds, the armor you constructed from years of endurance, none of it matters anymore. You stand alone with the truth of who you are, and this truth is both terrifying and liberating. It forces you to confront the sixth silent killer, the most final and devastating of all, the death of vision, not vision as in eyesight, but vision as in the inner force that once guided you like a burning constellation, the inner image of who you were meant to become, the future self that once whispered to you in the language of destiny. But over time, through fatigue, doubt, wounds, and the endless weight of survival, this vision begins to fade, slowly at first, then catastrophically. You stop seeing what you were fighting for. You stop imagining the life you intended to build. You stop feeling the gravitational pull of your future. And without vision, even the strongest ambition becomes a blade without an edge. This killer is not loud. It doesn't attack violently. It dissolves you gradually, eroding your sense of purpose, fracturing your identity from the inside out. You start to live day by day, not year by year. You wake without anticipation. You move without hunger. You breathe without intention. The fire inside you dims until it becomes an echo, a memory of a flame you're not sure ever truly existed. Machiavelli would warn you that a leader who loses vision becomes vulnerable to every force around him. A person without vision is a wandering target, predictable and weak, easy to manipulate, easy to break, easy to own. And the world is full of people ready to own those who have lost their sense of direction. Vision is the weapon that makes you feared. Its absence is what makes you prey. Most people do not realize how fragile their vision is. They do not see how many hands are reaching for it. Family, society, obligations, trauma, fear, comfort, insecurity. Every force in your life wants a piece of your future, and if you do not guard it with ruthless intensity, you will wake up one day and realize that nothing you are living reflects anything you once wanted. That moment is a funeral, a quiet, internal burial of the person you were meant to become. But there is something else, something darker, living beneath the sixth killer. Something that waits until your vision is weak enough to strike with finality. Because once your future becomes blurry, something else takes its place. Resignation. Resignation is not acceptance, it is surrender disguised as maturity. You tell yourself, maybe this is enough. You tell yourself, maybe I was reaching too high. You tell yourself, maybe I should be realistic. You tell yourself, maybe the life I envisioned was never meant for me. Every maybe is a coffin. Every compromise is earth thrown onto your dreams. Every attempt to normalize your shrinking becomes a ceremonial burial of the greater version of yourself. And Machiavelli would call this the most unforgivable betrayal, not betrayal of others, but betrayal of your own destiny. Because once resignation becomes your default state, you no longer fight, you no longer resist, you no longer hunger. You stop thinking strategically and start living reactively. You stop shaping your life and allow your life to shape you. You become a passive object in your own story, watching from the sidelines as someone less qualified, less intelligent, less capable, but more driven, takes the place that could have belonged to you. But the death of vision doesn't just kill your future, it kills your identity. You forget why you began. You forget what fueled your earlier sacrifices. You forget the storms you walked through, the pain you survived, the countless moments when you refused to break. The strength you built over years starts slipping from your fingers, replaced by an unfamiliar weakness that disgusts you yet feels impossible to reverse. You begin to wonder, where did my fire go? But fire does not disappear. Fire is stolen, and the thief is always the same: neglect. The slow, quiet neglect of your inner world. The world demands your time, energy, attention, obedience, conformity. And while you pour all your strength outward, nothing remains to feed the flame inside. One day, you reach for your hunger and realize it has collapsed into ash. Machiavelli would tell you this is the perfect condition for external forces to take control of your life. A person without vision is the easiest to rule, because they will walk any path, obey any voice, follow any rule, accept any fate that promises even the illusion of direction. But beneath this tragedy, beneath this death of vision, there is one truth that cannot be killed. The human soul remembers what it was designed for. Even if your mind forgets, even if your discipline weakens, even if your hunger fades, something deeper inside you never fully releases the image of who you were meant to become. You feel it in moments of stillness, in flashes of emotion that hit you unexpectedly, in sudden thoughts that jolt your consciousness awake like lightning. This buried version of you is not dead. It is imprisoned, and there is a sound so faint you almost miss it, a whisper from the locked chamber of your potential. Come find me. You feel it, a pull, a trembling inside your chest, a reminder that your story is not finished, a reminder that your vision is not gone. It is suffocating under years of neglect, but it is still alive. And if you listen closely, you feel something shift, something ancient and powerful, as if the future version of yourself is reaching backward, trying desperately to wake you. Your heart starts beating harder, not from fear, but from recognition, because you remember something. You were not born ordinary. You were not born to blend in. You were not born to settle. You were not born to quiet your own brilliance just to become digestible to the world. You were born to carve yourself into a weapon. You were born to intimidate limitations. You were born to walk into your destiny with the certainty of someone who refuses to be denied. And as this realization spreads through your bloodstream like fire, You recognize the final truth Machiavelli would whisper into your ear. Vision is not given, vision is taken, and it is kept only by those who are willing to fight for it with their entire soul. This is the moment all ambitious people eventually face, the moment when you must choose whether the next chapter of your life will be shaped by fear or by fire. If you choose fear, the killers win. If you choose fire, everything changes. Because the death of vision is reversible. You can resurrect your destiny. But resurrection is violent. It requires destroying every lie you've believed about your limits. It requires ripping complacency out of your bloodstream. It requires silencing the doubts that whisper in your darkest hours. It requires rising from the ashes of the person you unintentionally became and becoming the person you were always meant to be. You stand now on the edge of this transformation. You feel the tremor of awakening, the same tremor that shakes a sword the moment it leaves its sheath. The world does not know what is returning. It does not know the force it has underestimated. It does not know the power that is re-entering the battlefield. But you know, you feel it. Your future self is calling you with the urgency of someone who has waited too long, not softly, not gently, but with the ferocity of someone pounding on the walls of fate. And now, at the brink of this awakening, you must do the one thing Machiavelli believed separates the conquerors from the conquered. Reclaim your throne. Do it with hunger. Do it with clarity. Do it with defiance. Do it with an inner violence that refuses to let another day pass in mediocrity. Do it with the fire of someone who knows the world bends for only one kind of person, the one who demands it, because the killers will come again. Doubt will return. Fear will whisper. Complacency will wait. But you, once awakened, are no longer the same. You are no longer fragile. You are no longer lost. You are no longer soft. You are a weapon sharpened by suffering. You are a storm carved by struggle. You are the embodiment of a destiny too loud to die quietly. And now, the world will feel you. Not later, not someday, not when you're ready. Now, get up, rise with force, walk back into your destiny with teeth bared. Reignite the vision they tried to bury. Become the threat you were born to be. This is your moment. This is your war. This is your awakening. Now go take back everything that was always meant to be yours.